Hello class, this is Tom Simmons coming to you from my home in Chester, Vermont. And it's towards the end of January when I'm making this video, which means for the last month we spent a lot of time putting together maple lines and stringing maple tubings. We have a sugar bush behind the house and about 100 taps. And in just about a month or so, we hope to be boiling syrup down. And that means we will be one of 1,500 sugar houses in Vermont producing maple syrup for consumption for the next year. Fact is that Vermont produces 50% of all the maple syrup in the entire United States. So it's a big business here in Vermont. And while I say it's a big business, I really should qualify that by saying it's all small business. Because those 1,500 sugar houses are small businesses, and they're all located, with very few exceptions, right on the homes or the homesteads of the people who actually operate them. Now, of course, during the rest of the year, we can't be tapping maples in the spring or the summer or the fall. We've got to have other operations going on to keep this operation alive. And one of the things that we have found is that in addition to the maple that we can produce from our trees, we have a series of black walnut trees over on the other side of our property. Now, if you've never seen a black walnut, think of the walnuts you might buy in the supermarket, in the shell, and then put that inside of a lime, and you pretty much have what a black walnut nut looks like when it falls onto the ground. And for many people, it's a mess and it's a pain in the neck because it dulls your lawnmower blades and they make a mess all over the lawn. And the rinds that cover the nuts are full of a black chemical called juglone, which actually kills many different plants, and B, stains everything it touches. And that's the key. It stains everything it touches. So we've been harvesting our walnuts, taking the rinds, soaking them and processing them here on the homestead, and making walnut stain. And this is a quart of black walnut stain. Now, if any of you have ever been involved in woodworking or know anyone who is involved in woodworking, walnut stain is fairly expensive. You can buy it in almost any hardware store. But the typical wood stain is extremely heavy with chemicals and odors. This, of course, is not. In fact, this is 100% natural, and yet it produces a beautiful finish. If you look at this table here, this table was sanded down to raw wood, looked no different than a standard pine board that you might see in a lumber yard, and yet with 3 coats of our walnut stain, you've got this beautiful veneer on the top. Now, what makes this different than what you can just pick up in the supermarket or the hardware store? Well, the fact that there's no chemicals in it. If you've got someone in the house, if you're a weekend warrior woodworker and you want to do some woodworking and some staining, and there's someone in the house with chemical sensitivities and you don't want to fill the house with that kind of smell, you can use this natural wood stain. If you want to do woodworking in the middle of the winter when it's cold out and your doors and your windows are closed, you can do it without filling your house full of vapors that might be offensive or even harmful to someone. So that's the next product that we might be launching this year. And once again, that would be a small business. Small businesses, it's often been said, are the backbone of America. And I know when people think of business, they think of large corporations. They think of the Walmarts and the General Motors and the Facebooks of the world. But let me give you some statistics that show you that even though that's what we think of, those are not the engine of the economy. If you made a list of all the businesses in the United States of America, just one long list of every business, 99% of them would be small businesses. As for the effect they have on the economy, Well, you've probably heard reports on the news now and then saying that X number of new jobs were added to the economy. 200,000, 400,000 jobs were added. The fact is, 3 out of every 4 new jobs added to the U.S. economy are added in small businesses, not those big corporations that everyone thinks is the engine of the economy. The majority of us, 57% of Americans, are employed in a small business, not a mega corporation. So now you've got the majority of us working in jobs that were largely created by small businesses. 1 in 7 new small businesses are created by immigrants. It's one of the first things that many immigrants do when they get to the U.S. shores is actually pull themselves up and say, let me start a business. So, the purpose of this video is to give you a sense of the entrepreneurial spirit and the tension that exists between that spirit and the need for sound, data-driven planning to make sure that that new business actually takes off and succeeds. Most entrepreneurs are said to be, a little crazy sometimes. They get an idea and they run with it. The Steve Jobs and the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, the Bill Gateses of the world, all took twists and turns in their life, and a lot of people said, what are you doing that for? And it's because they had a dream. They had an idea. They were sure they could make it work if they just applied themselves to it. And entrepreneurs tend to be risk takers because they've got to be willing to have a plan, a direction, and then pivot at a moment's notice and say, you know what, that's not working, let me try it this way. And they've got to be willing to fail and not feel bad about it. Okay, so I failed. I learned something from that. Let me pick myself up and start all over again. It's at least one study that I read that said that the best entrepreneurs in America tend to be B and C students, not A students. And the reason for that is very often an A student tries too hard to get everything right, everything perfect before they move forward. Whereas the B and C students have a tendency to be spinning a lot of different plates and being a little more flexible with themselves and with what they're doing and how they do it. Now, one of the best entrepreneur stories I have, and I have many of them because I have many students that I've worked with in this area, but one of the best ones that I can tell you about is Dina Mohajer in California. Dina Mohajer was a law school student. She was in her early 20s, living in California. And she was young, kind of hip, and she couldn't find a nail polish color that she enjoyed. She thought they were all boring. And so she tried to do some research, figure out what makes the color stay and adhere to your fingernails. And she made some neon blue nail polish, which she thought was totally cool. So she put it on one day and she went off to Neiman Marcus, an upscale department store, and she was buying or looking at some goods at the cosmetics and the jewelry counter, and she got all these compliments on her nail polish. Where did you get that? What company is that? And she really wasn't thinking much about this as a business, but the more she talked with them, the more they thought, well, there's actually a market for this. And so Neiman Marcus asked her if she could make them 24 sample bottles to sell, to see if it would actually work in the store. So Dina went home and she made a batch of this nail polish, put it in small glass jars she was able to find. She brought it to Neiman Marcus. Within 24 hours, they had called her up and told her they sold out. Could she make more? And a business was born. Making nail polish took over Dina Mohajer's life. She actually took a leave of absence from law school and her boyfriend set up a nail polish business in her 3-room apartment. It took over the place. They were mixing batches of nail polish in bowls and buckets, and then filtering it into plastic ketchup squeeze containers, and filling up all these little glass bottles with these crazy colored nail polishes, neon blues and greens and fuchsia and purple. And just to put a little edge on it, she bought jelly rings, which apparently were big at the time, and put one jelly ring over the top of each of the nail polish containers, and they were spilling all over the place, and her dog was choking on them, and they had to rush their dog to the vet, and it took over her life. And the business began exploding. And we're going to come back to this story in a little bit, but I gave you some statistics about small business. There are some downsides to small business too, when you look at the statistics. And the downsides are 50% of all new small businesses will fail within 5 years. People pour their money and their soul and their heart and their sweat into building a small business, and it seems to be taking off. Within 5 years, half of them will no longer be there. Excuse me. If there's a natural disaster, like a Hurricane Katrina or a Superstorm Sandy, 80% of small businesses will not recover, and 1 month later will be out of business. So it's a big risk to take everything, all of your dreams, all of your cash, all of your money, all of your effort, and put it into a small business, and then roll the dice and see what's going to happen. And there are basically 4 reasons why these businesses fail. The first is a lack of capital, a lack of money. Most people don't realize how much money they need up front, how much support they need financially to get a business off the ground. This is especially true of brick and mortar businesses, which may survive on the money they take in between Black Friday and Christmas. But you still got to have money coming in the rest of the year to pay your bills. Very often people underestimate what they're going to need to pay employees, or shipping, or marketing, or supplies, or insurance, or whatever it is that they're going to need. The second reason is management. When you launch a company, it becomes your baby, right? No one has got all the skills necessary to manage every aspect of a company. I don't know anyone who is a great people person, and a great salesperson, and a great operations person, and a great research and development person, and great with the books, and great with supply. No one can do it all. And many people who launch a new business think that they can do it all. And you really can't. And that's why very often investors will look to see a management team in place. People who have different skills in different areas. Best advice you can be given? Hire someone smarter than you to do those things that you simply can't do. And be willing to admit and acknowledge that you can't do everything. Third reason that many small businesses fail is a very poor sense of marketing. Many years ago, the movie Field of Dreams came out, and the cliche throughout that movie was, if you build it, they will come. And many people have what they think is a great idea for a business. And if I can just get this up and running, oh, so many people will like this. And their friends, unfortunately, will support them in this and say, oh, that's a great idea. You'll do so well. Just start that business and the world will beat a path to your door. No, they won't. They've got to know you exist. You've got to find who your customers are. You've got to figure out how many of them there are in your service area. You've got to figure out how are you going to convey the value of your good or service to these people? Are they on LinkedIn, or are they on Snapchat? Are they retired, wealthy little old ladies, or are they young and hip and have about 2 cents to spare? Different people groups, different target markets require different strategies, and many people don't understand that. They open a store or they open a business, and you ask them, well, who's your target market? And they say, oh, everybody. Anybody in the community can come and buy my goods. Well, of course anybody can, but anybody won't. You need to find out who that subpopulation is that's going to find the most value in what you have to offer. And the fourth reason many small businesses fail in the first 5 years is because of government regulation. And there's kind of a discordance between what many people say they want government to do in terms of regulating small business and how it actually plays out in the real world. Very often when you hear people say that government should pass a regulation or pass a law or require corporations to do something in some area, doesn't matter whether it's safety or pay or worker safety, doesn't matter. They have in mind what we need to do to Walmart, what we need to do to Google, what we need to do to IBM, how this might affect a large corporation. But as I said earlier, the majority of 99% of all the businesses in the United States are small businesses. And so while we think, and our governing officials often think in terms of how do we pass a regulation to get IBM or GM to do something, the ones who are really being affected are the small maple producers and the natural walnut stain producers and the small restaurant down the road and the teddy bear company across the street and the seamstress and the Pilates studio. And very often we don't understand how these government regulations can impact the little guy. So one of the solutions, or one of the ways to try and brunt the effect of all of these issues, poor management, misunderstood marketing, need for cash, need to be on top of government regulations, is to have a business plan. Now, it's often been said that a business plan is obsolete the second the ink dries on that plan. And there is much truth to that. Because one of the advantages of being a small business is being able to pivot, being able to see a new need and respond to it very quickly with a lot of agility. Large corporations often cannot do that. However, it really, really helps to have a sense of what is my business? Who are my customers? How am I reaching them? How am I covering my daily and monthly expenses throughout the year if my income is going to be coming all at once? So, you want to try and put down on paper because it forces you to actually examine the viability of your business, the potential of success, and give you some guideline to go on. Now, every year I have students interview small businesses in their hometown. And I read hundreds of these interviews. And almost to a one, the small business owner will say, I didn't have a plan when I started. I just had a great idea and I started building it. Much like Dina Mohajer and her business. Hard Candy, by the way, is the name of that business. And every single one then says in the next breath, but boy, I wish I had a business plan. Because every one of them ran into expenses and issues that they might not have had if they had put more forethought into how they were going to grow and operate that business. So, the business plan becomes a very important outline. Even if you don't follow it, but it forces you to actually articulate what are you going to do and how are you going to do it and how are you going to pay for it and when is that income coming in and when are you going to turn a profit, and who are you selling to. So let's go back to Dina Mohajer now. She started this business, Hard Candy, that took over her life. And it didn't take long before they had lost track of who had paid for the nail polish they had shipped out and who hadn't. And it didn't take long before the orders started getting backlogged. And instead of shipping things out the day they received an order or the day after, a week or two had gone by because they had run out of a critical ingredient they needed. And they forgot about this particular order because it was taken on a scratch pad and the paper fell behind the table. And so what they needed to do was get professional. And they needed to build a business plan. And so that's what she did. And she brought in people who knew about computer systems and being able to run purchase orders and do inventory on a computer system and actually send out formal bills of sales. They contracted with a local paint company that mixed paints to actually mix their nail polish so they weren't shaking buckets in their living room. And they made this into a professional business that could respond to orders, that could expand markets, that could collect on accounts payable, accounts receivable, excuse me. By the time Dina was 30 years old, she was a millionaire. And she sold this company because that was part of her plan. She didn't want to be the next Estee Lauder. She didn't want to be running a business for the next, for the rest of her life. She wanted to build a great brand image and then sell it. And that's exactly what she did. So her story is very typical of many entrepreneurs. It's an idea, let's try it, let's do it, wow, this is great. Oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? Let's make this a little more formal and a little more professional and make sure that we can make it happen. And so her company that started with nail polish on a table ended up being an entire brand that produced mascara and lipstick and eyeliner and eyeshadow and nail polish, all of which were coordinated and edgy and targeted a specific young upscale market in fairly upscale communities. Every other company, every other major cosmetic company, Maybelline for one, tried to emulate her and copy her, so she kept changing the product and adding new products. She's a great success story. Now, back home on the local level, one of the ways that small businesses can get ahead, can grow, is to look at strategic alliances with other small businesses to leverage the strengths that other small businesses have. I had one student who was worked on tree clearing. You had an old tree that needed to be cut down. He'd cut down the tree, cut it up, and take it away for you. And as those of us here in Vermont know, a lot of trees are falling in the winter from an ice storm or heavy snows, and it makes a mess. And people want to get those cut up and off their property as soon as possible, and will pay a decent price for that. I had another student who also worked with wood, but in a very different way. What he did was make furniture. He purchased wood from the lumber yard or from anyone who was offering it for sale, and he built beautiful end tables and cabinets and shelving units. And that's what he did as his own small business. Hurricane Irene created the opportunity for a strategic alliance between these two students. Because as trees were falling all over the place, the one student got the job to clear those trees from homeowners' properties, for which they paid him. He partnered with the furniture making student, who then took those those trees and that lumber, and made his beautiful end tables and his cabinets and all the other pieces of furniture that he normally made. But then what they did was, together, they went back to the homeowner from whom the tree was cut and offered to sell them a piece of furniture made with their very own tree. In other words, they actually received 2 sales from one instance, from one incident. Tree falls on my property, I pay someone to chop it up and take it away. They come back and they've got a beautiful table, and I say to myself, wow, we can actually have a piece of furniture made from that beautiful old maple tree we used to have on the front lawn. Yes, I'll buy that. It was a great alliance between these 2 students. And I'd be lying if I didn't say that I'm kind of hoping that at some point I can contact them and ask them if they might have any use for locally produced, locally sourced, non-chemical walnut wood stain to stain some of that furniture. I'll do that at some point because I've got this entrepreneurial spirit. I have a lot of ideas. I like to try a lot of new things, and it makes sense to leverage your ideas with others who have similar ideas. And maybe that small business, instead of being one person, can be a team of people, or 2 people, or 3 people, or 5 people, each of whom have different skills. That's the way you build a business that builds in some insurance that it's not just going to fail. So, this has been a real brief overview. As I've said, small business is the backbone of America. It's exciting, it's changing, it's constantly drawing on changes in our demographics and in our economy and in our communities. It's a way for people with a little incentive to say, I want to try this, I want to do this, I think there's a need for this. And if we can join that entrepreneurial spirit of, yes I can, with the sense of, but how am I going to do it? Let's do the research. Let's crunch the numbers. Let's make sure it happens. If you can join entrepreneurship with sound business planning, you'll be one of those 50% of small businesses that actually survive. You'll be one of those small businesses that is providing 3 out of 4 new jobs in the economy. And you'll be providing a service to your friends, to your neighbors, to your community, because you're providing a good or a service at a price that brings value to them. That's the nature of small business and entrepreneurship. Thanks for watching. See you in our next video.